Hello friends, I'm keeping these end of the year reflection type of videos going, and today we're going to be doing the end of the year book tag. And this is one I've been meaning to do. I wasn't sure if I was going to do some kind of, pseudo award show for the end of the year, or whether I was just going to do this tag, because I've seen other booktubers do this tag and the questions seem to vary a lot and some of them don't pertain to me. So what I did is I took some of the lists that I've seen, I've added, removed, and kind of made my own assortment of the questions and prompts. So if you guys want to answer these same questions, I'll leave them in the description so you can make your own video. I'd love to hear your responses to these, but feel free to, again, do what I did, add, remove, alter certain questions. But without further ado, let's jump into this tag. The first prompt is, what was an overhyped book you read? Now, I was tempted to say 1984, but actually it's another book that kind of fits in that same dystopian realm that gets more worshipped, in my opinion, than it should here in America and in the school system here, and that is Fahrenheit 451. That book just sucked. In my humble opinion, that book just was very underwhelming. Now, maybe if it wasn't put on this pedestal in my mind and in our society, I wouldn't attack it so vehemently. But to me, the story felt rushed. The main character, quickly changes his mind after he's working as part of this fireman crew burning these books. He kind of changes his mind really quickly. It's not fully explained, but then he's been keeping track of these books for a long time and secretly keeping them. It just seems a little bit inconsistent from my memory when I read the book. The other thing where he's kind of, I don't know if you want to call it predatory or being a bit of a, I believe the term is hebephile, where he's kind of like taking more of an interest than he should in this teenage girl next door. I didn't really like that aspect at all. And it seemed a little unnecessary in the way that he was kind of viewing and engaging with her. And overall, I thought the premise and the idea was kind of interesting. This idea of a fireman crew coming in and burning books, and that dystopian idea of censorship and all of that. But the book just fell flat to me. The characters weren't interesting. The dialogue was boring. Like I said, all the characters just felt bland and flat to me. And for that reason, it underperformed. I'll save 1984 some slack because, like I said when I critiqued it in a video a few months ago, I loved actually the idea and the premise, and I think it would have worked phenomenally as an essay. But some of the aspects of the story, the plot, the characters, their lack of bravery and inconsistency, I didn't love. But that's for another topic. My choice for this is for Fahrenheit 451. Second is a book that surprised you. And for me, that is Beloved by Toni Morrison. Now, it wasn't that I was expecting this book to be bad at all. In fact, I thought it was going to be a great read. I saw it recommended often. Morrison is a name that gets praised as one of the greatest American writers in our history. And so I went into the book thinking, okay, it would be enjoyable, it would be good, it would be quite enlightening in a lot of aspects. But I didn't expect it to stick with me the way it has. When I was reading it, I did, I don't know if resonate's the right word, but I felt it was quite compelling to me. And especially towards the back half of the book, I started to connect the dots and understand how the story and how it was chronologically set up much better. But really, as this book has kind of marinated in my mind, I've digested it more as I've discussed it here and there throughout the year. I find myself wanting to come back to it and reread it. I don't think I'll reread it soon because I do plan to read Song of Solomon this year, so I'll get a bit of my Morrison fix there. But I do feel like it's very probable that I come back to this book in the somewhat near future, just because it does seem to just contain more and more layers to this book, to the trauma, to what Morrison is trying to relay and convey through the characters, that I need to, upon more reflection, it just continues to surprise me. So that's what I mean by it surprised me, because of kind of what's emerging out of me after reading the book, not necessarily the first time or the first impressions reading the book itself. The third prompt is the longest book I read this year, and that is an easy question to answer. It is The Demons by Hamito van Dordrecht. This 2-volume set right here, just over 1,600 pages. Oh, it took me a little bit over 2 months, or about 2 months, something like that. I just posted a video here recently on the channel, so if you've never heard of it, if you're curious, if 1,600 pages sounds like a fun adventure for you, go watch that review and then make up your mind. The next prompt is the best short story you read this year, and for me, it's The Peterson Kid by William H. Gass. I hadn't read any of William Gass before, and I was starting to get interested in The Tunnel, which, as far as I know, is his magnum opus. But I thought before I take on that endeavor and indulge myself in that work, I should dabble in his short stories first, get a feel for his writing style. And this collection is wonderful. In the Heart of the Country, published by New York Review of Books. I read this, I think, middle of the year, and I'm really impressed with this short story. The Peterson Kid is one I need to come back to. I'm going to be discussing it in an upcoming video, so I'll save it for that. But it's a very strange, almost, what would you call it, disorienting type of work, the way the information is kind of relayed to you. It's very like terse in the writing style and the dialogue. It leaves a lot of room for interpretation. You really feel the violence of the winter and the blizzard that has come in on this town, and the mystery of the Peterson Kid and what's going on with him, and the danger and the tension between family members. It's really a very riveting story. It's one I need to read again to fully grasp. I had to reflect on it after I read it. And overall, this collection is pretty nice. I will say it tends to get worse with each story, in my opinion. I think it like starts strong, and then the stories start to get less enjoyable. But The Peterson Kid, to give a direct answer, the answer is The Peterson Kid is likely the best short story I read this year. The fifth prompt is new favorite author you discovered this year. And an easy answer would be Cartarescu, but I've talked about him way too much this year in a lot of these videos. And so the next best choice would be Jorge Luis Borges. I've heard a lot about Borges, and I picked up this collection, I think, back in August. And I read, I think, 5 of the short stories in a vlog a couple weeks back on my channel. So if you want to hear some of my first impressions reading Borges, that would be the place to go. But he is a writer that has really grabbed my attention, and I think is someone who I will be returning to over and over, not just this year, not just reading these stories for the first time, but someone I refer back to, I think, for years to come and decades to come. He's someone that blends in almost like mathematics and physics and metaphysics and philosophy into these very complex, almost dreamlike stories. They seem very intricate. The intricacies, the creativity, it's very dazzling in these works. And yeah, I mean, just a few stories I read stood out to me. So I'll definitely be coming back to this nice collection that I have here, and just slowly picking away at these stories and nibbling at the creativity that is Jorge Luis Borges. Next is author that didn't work out for you this year. And I hope this doesn't ruffle any feathers, but for me it was Joseph Conrad. I read this small little book here that has Heart of Darkness and The Secret Sharer, and I didn't have a problem with either short story. It's just they didn't wow me. I think I've seen a lot of praise for Heart of Darkness, and for me, I don't know if I didn't read it at the right time, I didn't read it as attentively as I should have, but it didn't grip me in the same way that it gripped a lot of people. Like the barbarism and monstrous personality that is contained in Heart of Darkness, it didn't stand out to me that much. It didn't really shock me in the way that other people have seemingly been shocked or struck by this story. And I think part of it too, I've mentioned this in another video, any kind of seafaring book doesn't quite do it for me, which is why I'm a little bit nervous about Moby Dick. But both of these stories have some form of kind of seafaring, or not necessarily like the sea, but boating aspect to it that maybe I just don't resonate with because I haven't had those life experiences. But for some reason, yeah, Joseph Conrad just didn't do it for me. Now, I do see his works almost every time I go to any of these bookstores, whether it's Lord Jim or I can't think of some of the other titles. I actually almost bought a portable Viking edition of Conrad stories. I was in good condition. I thought about buying it, but I was like, I'm not sold on Conrad yet, so it'd be kind of foolish to buy a collection like that. But yeah, that's to answer the question. It's an author that didn't work out for me this year. Perhaps he will. Perhaps I'll come around to him in the future. Perhaps a different work will, um, you know, impress me more than Heart of Darkness did. But unfortunately, it was Conrad. The next prompt was a little bit difficult to answer, but it is, what is the happiest book you read this year? I read a lot of sad books, as I imagine a lot of you do as well. They're not maybe sad through and through, but they often have either tragic characters or tragic endings or components to them. And that's usually what makes literary fiction great, is because it is portraying the rawness and the flaws of humanity and real suffering and pain. And that's why we can connect, because we've all had experiences like that. All that to say, the probably happiest book I read is The Knight in the Panther's Skin by Shoto Rustavelli. And if you don't know, this book is, it's easily the most influential work in Georgian history, as far as I know. It was written in medieval Georgia. Rustavelli is known as one of the greatest poets, and I think he's just... I had someone comment recently who's from Georgia about how profound the influence of Rustavelli is in that country. I mean, they used to include a copy of this book with the dowry of every bride in Georgia. So that's the kind of level of influence we're talking about here. But the book itself follows these knights. It's very heroic. It contains this chivalric romance. It has fast-paced action, almost a little too fast-paced, where you're like, come on. It's almost like if John Wick was a knight, where he's always winning these battles. He, barely gets a scratch on him. But it's a very endearing story. The translation makes it a little bit difficult, but the romanticism of it and the brotherhood and loyalty still shines through. It has a happy ending. So you really can't ask for much more. That's probably the happiest book I read. Now, we talked about happy books. The next prompt deals with what is the saddest book I read this year. And there's a lot of options to choose from. One that would be an honorable mention here would be Stoner. But I already mentioned that in my best books of the year. But that book did give me very bleak and somber moments. I did crack some tears at one point. But I think it was a couple influencing factors with that. But the saddest book for me was White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This book is all over Instagram. It's all over everywhere. And for good reason. It's a little bit, I don't want to say overhyped, but sometimes when this book gets pushed around everywhere, you go in with high expectations. And I did. But I also really connected with the story. And the story is so romantic. I think it really contains that idealism that Fyodor Dostoevsky has in a lot of his works, and that kind of just fateful inevitability of a tragic and sad, heartbreaking ending. And White Nights has that. And it's coming. It's hinted at and foreshadowed really in the get-go when Nastenka tells him, don't fall in love with me, and he can't help himself. So that's probably the saddest book, but it's also a wonderful read as well. The next prompt is a fun one. What is the most frustrating book you read this year? And for me, part of me wants to say Wuthering Heights, more so because I'm frustrated at the characters and how just toxic and emotionally disturbed they are. But I'll defer that and go with Gravity's Rainbow. This book was frustrating to read just because it's hard to follow. It's infamously known for being a confusing, perplexing book. There's so many characters to keep up with. Things are, purposefully a bit enigmatic. And so, it's up to you to piece things together, to solve the puzzle, to solve the riddle. And for that reason, it was frustrating, but rewarding at the same time. Next is a book you haven't stopped thinking about. And I mentioned earlier that Beloved has been on my mind as well, here and there over the past few months. But another book that I've just thought about more and more is Hard Rain Falling by Don Carpenter. This book it's raw, it's hard hitting. It follows this callous, recalcitrant youth who is in this desperate scramble for identity. He's trying to fight faith. He's trying to overcome and really enact his anger and frustration at the world for his poverty, for being orphaned, for all the things that are going on. And, you know, through these different characters, this character of Billy and the events that follow within the novel, he slowly goes through quite a deep, profound transformation. And it's a really compelling story. It's one I wrote a review on it, so if you do want to hear more of my succinct thoughts on it, check out my Substack because I have a more thorough written review on it. But this is a book that I almost will certainly reread in the future, and one that I keep thinking on. And it seems like the more I do think about it, the more I can extract from it. So for that reason, it's one that has stayed on my mind. The next prompt is a scene that stuck with you. And for me, I didn't love the book. It was all right. I didn't love the book, but there is one scene that permanently stained my mind, and that is in Jude the Obscure. If you've read this book, you know what scene it is. All I'll say is it's a very disturbing and harrowing scene of murder and suicide. So I'll leave it at that. But that was a scene that was, you know, once I read it, I kind of had to go, you know, and take a breath there. So it was that kind of scene. The next prompt is a book you thought you'd love but didn't. And this one still stinks. It still disappoints me. And that is The Instructions by Adam Levine. I still want to hold out hope for this book. If you watched a few weeks back, I called it, quote, garrulous garbage. And I do think it is that. Until proven otherwise, it does feel like a bunch of bloviating. Creative aspects, yes, but way inflated, way bloated here. It doesn't need to be all this. And I made it like 300 pages in. I had another, I don't know, of these 2 volumes, another 700-800 pages to go. And I said, nope. No, and I wanted to love it. I really wanted to love it. I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I was so excited about it. In fact, I got The Instructions and The Demons around the same time. So 2 monstrous books, 2 monstrous 2-volume, set novels. And I picked The Instructions first because I thought, oh, I'm gonna love this book. I did not. Like I said, I'm still holding out hope. I still haven't gotten rid of it, obviously. I know some people that we share the same taste that like it. That's why I'm like, did I miss something? I don't think I missed something. But it disappointed. The next prompt is a book with the most unique concept you read this year. Now, I could go Solenoid, Blinding, I could go Borges, I could go Gravity's Rainbow. But really one I'm going to go with, and I could show you it. I'm being a little bit lazy because it's under a bunch of books right now. But The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's a very fascinating concept of this character who is altering history with his dreams. Then he goes with his psychiatrist who is leveraging this machine to try and influence and kind of input suggestions for his dreams. And through these dreams, they're both he and the doctor, although not working together in a way, they're trying to use his dreams for the good of humanity. They're trying to solve racism and poverty and overpopulation, climate issues, and all of that. But they end up creating a whole, larger catastrophes and seeking out this homeostasis that life and nature seem to resist at every point. So it's a very creative concept, in my opinion, and really it's a creative way of exploring some of these deeper issues, these perennial themes. So for that reason, that would be my selection. I'd like to read more of Le Guin in the future. I want to talk my wife into reading the Earth-Sea. What is it? Is it a trilogy? The Earth-Sea collection trilogy, whatever it is. I want to read that with my wife. I think she would enjoy it as well. But we'll see. Maybe not next year, but soon. I need to read more Le Guin. Next is a book you read this year that you would reread. And for me, that is Oblomov by Ivan Goncharov. This book really surprised me. I called it a forgotten Russian masterpiece, and I had someone comment on, I think it was on Instagram, and they were like, "What do you mean Russian or forgotten Russian masterpiece? It's in every bookstore I go to." I'm like, "Well, maybe for you, buddy, but not the bookstores I go to. I imagine for many of you, there's not copies of Oblomov lining the shelves as there are Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, or even Turgenev, but I gave it that praise mainly just to push the idea of this is a book you need to read. This is a phenomenal Russian novel that deserves to be in the same class with a Dostoevsky, a Chekhov, Pushkin, all of that. It's a very, very rewarding story. I think the themes and questions that deal with personal happiness, that deal with leisure versus work, work-life balance, even the elements of love between Oblomov and Olga, I think are still relevant today. So for that reason, I mean, you can see I tabbed up this sucker. I made a whole review video on it, so whether you want a video or written review, you can find that on the channel, on the Substack. But this is, to me, if you like Russian literature and you haven't read Oblomov, this is the next book on your list. 2 more prompts to go. This one is a book you wish you got to this year. I thought I'd fit it in. I planned to read it all of December. And then I got talked out of it for another kind of reading project that I'm very much enjoying. So I'm glad I made the switch. But the book I wanted to read this year was Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. This is a chunker. That's the only thing probably slowing me down about it. And the funny thing is, every time I mention this book, someone in the comments, understandably so, but someone in the comments says, you need to read Stalingrad first. It's the prequel to that. I'm sure it is. I believe you. But Stalingrad's even bigger than this. I already own this book. I'm going to start here. I'm going to start here. I'll read Stalingrad as well. But, you know, I got one 900-page book, you know, on my shelf, and then you're telling me to read another 900-page before I even get to the book I already own. It's a little bit of a hard sell. But Life and Fate is the book I wish I got to this year. Squeezing it in next year is hard. I didn't include it in the book club pick, which the book club mostly contains all the big reads for the year. So if I want to fit this in, I'm going to have to read it like alongside Magic Mountain, or alongside A War and Peace, alongside some other large work. So we will see. But if not next year, really soon, and maybe I'll fit it December. We'll see. We'll see. And the last prompt is, what will you prioritize in your 2025 reading year? Like I mentioned in some recent videos, I don't have any, strict guidelines or plans or rules I have to follow. I don't like setting book total goals or anything like that. But if I was to describe what I'd like to do more next year, is controlled eclecticism. Now, what I mean by that is I still want to be a bit of an eclectic reader. I still want to dabble in new genres, try new authors. There's so many authors and genres and historical or in literary periods I haven't even dipped my toes in, let alone really gotten settled with. So there's a lot of work to do, but I also don't want to read from a position of feeling like I have to catch up or rush. I've thought that way a little bit in the past with, I gotta scramble to read all the classics. They're not going anywhere. The classics are going to be there. Homer, the Iliad, Dante, it's going to be there for me. I don't need to rush. So what I mean by controlled eclecticism is continue to try new authors, to continue to try and broaden my horizons. But at the same time, I want to focus in on particular authors, particular periods, particular themes or topics, and go deep on them. I'm kind of doing that right now with Laszlo Krasznahorkai. And I could do it with Dostoevsky, read more of his works, really get a full grasp of what he's all about. I plan to do that with Vladimir Sorkin next year. I've obviously taken a big interest and stock into Russian literature and Russian history. As I learn the language, it just pairs well. And so I have no problem or no qualm with focusing in on, or like isolating in or narrowing in on a particular topic, author, and not feeling like I have to read everything in one year. So that's what I mean by controlled eclecticism, is continue to diversify and dabble, but also, indulge myself on a little bit more of a focus, if that makes sense. That's what I'd like to do in 2025. 2026, we'll see. But for the next 12 months, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So that's it for this video. I'd love to hear your comments and your responses. So whether you make a video, email me, or just leave comments to some of these prompts in the comment section below. I'd love to hear it. Even if you aggressively disagree with me on anything I said in this video, that's fine as well. I look forward to it. So like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more content, and I will see you all in the next one.